The South African motorists are bracing themselves for a massive fuel hike effective from Wednesday. Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy, Gwede Mantashe, announced that both grades of petrol will go up by R1.46 per litre. This while diesel will spike by R1.48 per litre. The government has largely attributed this to fears created by the escalating conflict in Ukraine. Joining me now is the Automobile Association spokesperson, Layton Beard. Layton, a pleasure to have you on the program this afternoon despite these circumstances. Now, it's safe to say that South African consumers as well as businesses are in for a flurry of price increases in the coming weeks as a combination of global factors and local changes take effect. Talk us through your own assessment.
I think it's still obviously early days to see what's going to happen in the months after April, but certainly going into March, it's going to be a tough ride. We saw that international oil moderated somewhat yesterday after spiking to record levels earlier in the week. That at least is a positive development. How long that will last, I think, remains to be seen, and there's a lot to be determined in the next couple of days and weeks. In terms of Russia's output, it's one of the biggest exporters and producers of oil. So certainly the fact that it's involved in this conflict and the sanctions that have been brought from, against it by Western countries will have an impact. And so it's really a question of how this is going to play out. But it would undoubtedly, in our view, have an impact. And it's going to have a severe and negative impact, specifically on the poor in the country. And then longer term, rising fuel costs in South Africa do play a hugely significant inflationary role as well. So absolutely agree with your assessment, Nkandla. It's not going to be a pleasant ride going forward, at least for the next couple of weeks.
So Russia's attack on Ukraine this week has thrown the global market into disarray, with both the rand as well as the global oil prices pointing to even higher increases. Now, should the current market conditions persist and these increases be realized, are you convinced that the hikes would see fuel prices pushed to maybe even record highs?
Well, we're in record territory already. We've never seen fuel prices above 21 rand a litre inland or 20 rand a litre at the coast. So we're already in that record territory. Anything that comes now that's an increase is just further pushing those prices into record territory. You're asking me to peg a number. You're asking me to put a stake in the ground. It's a naughty question, and it's a very dangerous question for me to ask. Could we see 25 rand a litre? I don't know. Could we see 30? I have no idea. Again, it's a question of where we go in terms of what the rand does and what the oil prices do over the next couple of weeks. I mean, when we look at the increases going into March, had the rand not performed as well as it has against the greenback in the last couple of days, these increases would have been more significant than what they are. So the rand actually played a good alleviating role in terms of the increases going into March. But, I mean, sadly, it's the situation in Ukraine pushing oil prices higher, and that's why we're seeing this very negative picture for March.
Now, for the benefit of our viewers, please quickly explain to us other factors that influence the price of fuel. We already spoke or alluded to the situation playing out in Ukraine and its impact.
Yeah, I think when we look at the prices as they are at the moment, that pretty much sums up where we are in terms of the impact on the fuel price. It's really got to do with that big international oil leak that we saw earlier in the week. Fortunately, though, the price seems to, as I said earlier, have moderated somewhat over the last 24 hours. There's naturally some hope that that moderation will continue into the new week. Again, it's a question of wait and see.
Now, when we take a look at the kind of increases that are set to take effect from Wednesday, it would really anticipate that it would place a big strain on the finances of all South Africans. What impact does a fuel hike cause, not just for consumers, but for businesses as well as transport services in the country?
No, the impact, I think, is huge. When we look at the price of illuminating paraffin, for instance, you're looking at an increase of around 25 a litre there. We're currently, going out of summer into autumn. It's going to be a more moderate autumn than it was a hot summer. So it means that, the nights are going to get a little colder, the mornings are going to get colder, and we're going to start moving into winter. Illuminating paraffin is used for heating, cooking, and lighting, and that demand is going to increase the closer we get to winter. Now, people who are using illuminating paraffin, we all know, are amongst the poorest in our country. and an increase of around 25 to that fuel, which pushes it already above 13 rand a litre, which is also record territory, is going to have a huge impact on people. 35% of our population is unemployed. There's people living on the breadline. These increases are going to be astronomically bad for many millions of South Africans, and we cannot hide from that fact. In terms of the second part of your question, in terms of the manufacturing and agricultural sector, it's a huge input cost. It's going to impact on transport costs, and we're incredibly reliant on transport in South Africa for goods and for services. So when that input cost goes up, obviously it's going to be passed on to consumers. We're going to see, incremental increases to various products and services. That basket of goods is just going to become that much more expensive. If you are already struggling to make ends meet, this is not going to be good news. And it comes as it does off the back of increases to toll fees. It comes as it does of increases to utility prices in the form of 10% increases to Eskom rates. There's increases across the board. Salaries and wages have not been keeping pace. Those who are fortunate to earn salaries and wages. So yes, I mean, the impact generally on the South African economy is going to be enormous. Thankfully, in Frankfurt, going into April, the one silver lining is we won't have any increases to the taxes on fuel, as the government heeded the AA's calls not to increase the general fuel and road accident fund levies. So there is that, but these increases are going to hurt. Let's not pick any bones about that.
These increases are going to hurt quite a lot to South African consumers. But before I let you go, I also want to take a look at the statement released by the Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy, Gwede Mantashe, also citing the sanctions slammed against Russia by the US as well as the UK as another contributing factor to the increase in crude oil prices. What is your assessment there?
Look, I think the language is very terse. I won't go down that route. I think suffice to say that there are still some issues around the exportation and importation of fuel and how that's impacting on Russia that obviously still need to be ironed out. It's a wait-and-see game at the moment in Frankfurt. What we know is that the incursion into Ukraine caused oil prices to spike. There's been some easing of that, as I said, over the last 24 hours. How this is going to play out over the next week is something we need to see. The net result of everything is that this is a major geopolitical development on the international stage, and it's having an impact locally. And I think for many millions of people, that's the bottom line, right?